way. That kind of galactic, mercurial, quicksilver, broad reference wit. But also a genius mimic, as he showed later on as well in Stellar Street.
Coming up, it's voting day. The chair of the Democratic Party in the state of Florida will give us the views of one of the most important swing states in the race to the White House. And we'll hear from Britain's youngest published author, who has written a book about her mother's autism.
This is Times Radio.
Now here's the news with Rachel Jewell.
Thanks, John. Good evening. The breaking news tonight is that the UK's terror threat level is being raised from substantial to severe. It means an attack is highly likely. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says the escalation isn't based on any specific threats.
The British public should be alert but not alarmed. This is a precautionary measure following the terrible incidences that we've seen in France last week and the events that we saw in Austria last night.
Well, England is preparing for a month-long nationwide shutdown from Thursday. The gunman shot dead after the Vienna terror attacks had previously been jailed for trying to join the Islamic State group. 4 people were shot dead and 22 injured in Austria's capital last night. Eric Fry is a senior editor at The Standard in Vienna. He's told Times Radio many people were enjoying a last night of open restaurants and bars before the start of a coronavirus lockdown, and more is emerging about what happened.
Seems to be he was a single gunman. Last night there was all speculation about 5, 6, even 7 gunmen around. It turns out there was only one, and that's what the police also and the Interior Minister confirmed today. He just kind of ran a circle in the inner city in a very lively neighborhood, vibrant neighborhood, full of cars and of bars and cafes and restaurants.
Barbara Lovett lives in Vienna and was in the State Opera last night. As the news of the shooting spread, people were asked to stay in the theatre to keep safe, and 4 members of the orchestra returned to stage to help calm everyone. Barbara's told Times Radio it was surreal.
Because Austria is so small, we tend to think we are sort of separated from the rest of the world. We have this little image of being happy-go-lucky and always the music is playing, and this is what happened. That for everybody was, oh my God, the life will go on because the music is still playing. But of course it's slowly sinking in that we're part of a bigger problem, of the problem of the world at the moment.
More than 100 million voters have already cast their ballots in the US presidential election, one of the tightest ever races. Polls are open for people to elect Democratic candidate Joe Biden or to give Republican President Donald Trump another 4 years in the White House. Bucks County Commissioner Robert Harvey says officials in Pennsylvania aren't used to such high demands.
10 times as many mail-in ballots as we had 4 years ago. This is the first year Pennsylvania has what's called no excuse mail-in balloting, which means anybody can get a ballot mailed to them. They fill it out, mail it back. The staff, these are all county employees, are really doing an amazing job. They've been working 12 to 18-hour days for weeks now.
Boris Johnson says mass coronavirus testing being tried out in Liverpool could be rolled out to millions by Christmas. From Friday, everyone living in the city will be offered a rapid test, which is supposed to give results in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, the Chief Medical Officer to the UK government has been answering questions from MPs about England's second lockdown. Professor Chris Whitty said COVID-19 in some hospitals in the north of England are seeing more cases now than during the first wave.
Our worry there is, although in those areas it looks as if the increase in rates, the R in the community, is flattening, it has not fallen below 1 as far as we can see. It is still going up. And if they started carrying on going up from this very high base, they would get into serious trouble on inpatients very quickly.
Actor and comedian John Sessions has been hailed as a genius following his death at the age of 67. The star was known for appearances on shows like QI and Have I Got News for You, and for his work on Spitting Image. His movie credits include Florence Foster Jenkins. Impressionist and comedian Rory Bremner appeared with John on Whose Line Is It Anyway? He's told Times Radio he was a force of nature.
He was just devilishly good with the impressions and the mimicry and the anecdotes and his own world of improvisation. He was sort of James Joyce stream of consciousness good.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, most parts dry with sunny spells, still rather cold but with lighter winds, turning wet and windy across northern Scotland though later. Our top sports story this hour, Wales manager Ryan Giggs won't be in charge of the team for the next 3 games after his arrest on suspicion of assault. Police were called to reports of a disturbance at a house in Greater Manchester on Sunday night. We'll have a full sports roundup at 5:30.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker. John Pienaar, A Drive, on Times Radio, powered by Range Rover. Trump versus Biden, 2020, on Times Radio.
Now, I wonder how many of you are planning to be up through the early hours following surely the most momentous American election we've ever seen. It's not a rhetorical question. I'd really love to know. Is it going to be for you hot dogs and beer at 2 a.m.? Are you going to be listening to what's going on in bed, hopefully with Matt Shorley's Times Radio election special with you under the duvet? Or will you wake up and see and hear what has happened, which may just be the news that the scrapping and the wrangling in the US courts and outside has just kicked off? Now, tell us your thoughts. A text to 722. Start with the word Times and tell us how you're spending the night and what are your feelings at the edge of this moment. Or a tweet to @Times Radio. And while you're doing that, this might help settle the way you're thinking, or it might not, but it'll be worth listening anyway. Jeff Skelly is with us. He's the elections analyst at the US website 538. Good evening to you, Jeff.
Hey, well, over here it's about noon, but good evening to you over there.
Yeah, good afternoon to you. Let's look at it from your end. Jeff, just give us a roundup, if you can, really briefly on what are these final polls telling us, and given how wrong they have been in 2016, can we believe what they tell us?
Sure. So the final polls in the race didn't really shift our outlook. We have a forecast, a probabilistic forecast, and we give Joe Biden just shy of a 9 in 10 chance of winning. Now, if the weatherman tells you there's about a 10% chance of rain, if it actually does rain that day, you wouldn't be totally stunned, right? So I think it's important for people to understand that when we say Trump has a 1 in 10 chance, that doesn't mean he has a 0% chance. 10 and 0 are different numbers. But in terms of the polls and thinking about 2016, I think some important differences to keep in mind are that in 2016 there were a lot more undecideds, and that played a big role in Trump's victory in 2016 because he won over a lot of the late deciding voters. But this time around, there are just not nearly as many undecideds or people who say they're going to vote for a third-party candidate, so that's reduced some uncertainty there. But of course, we have COVID-19 and more mail balloting than the country's ever had. About 100 million people have already voted, which is wild, unparalleled in U.S. history. And so that, I think, adds a different wrinkle of uncertainty that we haven't had.
Yeah, I mean, how confident are you in what you're saying, Jeff? Because look, there's another pollster. He's a bit of a loner on this, and you'll know this at the polling organisation Trafalgar, who acts on the premise that everyone's lying, that they did last time, they'll be lying more this time, and on that basis, this poll is saying Trump is going to become the president for a second term. What do you make of that assessment?
Well, I mean, I can't completely discount it. I mean, maybe he'll end up being right. But at the same time, I think what he is operating on is that there's this phenomenon called shy Trump voters. And you, as Britain, you guys may be very familiar with this because I think the whole idea originated in the early 90s with John Major winning because of shy Tories. Basically, the thought is that in 2016, part of the reason why Trump won was that there were people who wouldn't tell pollsters that they planned on supporting him. But the thing is that theory has never really been proven. When it comes down to it, if you actually do a social science experiment to see if how people are interviewed actually changes significantly the result in a ballot test, Morning Consult, an American pollster, did this, where the only thing that differed was whether people took the poll online or whether they did it over a live interview. They were sampled the exact same way. Everything else was the same. And they found no statistical difference in support. Basically, it was a 1-point difference with a margin of error of plus or minus 3. So it's really hard. Like, it's possible that there are some shy Trump voters out there, but it's really hard to say that there's a meaningful number. And so, if Trafalgar ends up being right, it will be based on something that had been proven previously. So maybe it does pan out, but I am skeptical.
Okay, Jeff, lovely to hear from you. Jeff Skelly from 538, the pollsters. Now, let's talk about Florida, and let's go to Florida, and let's talk to the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, Terry Ritter. She's been on the ground in Miami today and joins us now on the line. Hello, Terry. Good evening. Sorry, good afternoon where you are. Good evening where I am.
Well, actually, it is afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Thank you, John. I'm delighted to be here with you. It's a beautiful day in Miami. It's a beautiful day in Florida, and it's going to be a beautiful day for America.
Oh, a good day for voting. I mean, it's always
yes, it is.
It's always good news for voting. Not that I don't know if the weather counted much, but people have been turning out pretty well, and the numbers of people who voted already ahead of polling day. It is, well, I don't know if you know the British colloquialism, gobsmacking. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, yes, I do know that very well, and it is. We've had extraordinary early voting turnout, in particular with our vote by mail. The Democrats in Florida have voted in record numbers when it came to vote by mail. And to get our votes in early and get them counted. So it's we're very excited. Going in with a bit of a lead, and we're seeing great turnout, good turnout today. The lines are steady, and we're looking forward to the results tonight.
Yeah, now if you talk to the chair of the Florida Democratic Party while voting is still going on, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a very upbeat assessment, along with, I'm sure, a reminder to people to go out and vote. But take that aside and tell me, how does it feel? How does it feel in your gut now, Terry, seeing what you're seeing at the polling station in these early hours and looking at those polls and knowing your patch the way that you do? How are you feeling?
Well, as you know, Florida there are no landslides in Florida. It's always close and it's always tight. But I feel good. I feel what I'm seeing. We're seeing on the ground. We're seeing a steady turnout. We're seeing a tremendous enthusiasm across the state. And we see that voters are recognizing that what Donald Trump and the administration have done in terms of failure to our country and to our state in terms of healthcare, in terms of climate, in terms of virtually everything. And voters are recognizing that.
Yeah, look, it's also acknowledged, isn't it, that when it comes to polling day, the supporters of the president, the Republican voters, are much more likely to be the ones who turn out in force. So you're taking account of that there could be something of a red wave today at the polling places, whereas there may have been something more like a blue wave leading up to this.
Well, we're seeing enthusiasm of the voters of all parties, of course, and we also have what are called no party affiliates. People who aren't registered in either party, and they're voting in large numbers too. And we believe that the in addition to the Democrats, many of the NPAs, the no party affiliates, will be voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for change, to bring true change back to America, and restore, as we say, restore the soul of our country and build back better. And of course, we want to make sure that everybody does get out and vote. It's a beautiful day for democracy here, and we want every voter to go to the polls. Polls close at 7 o'clock our time in the evening, and we'll expect to see an increased turnout as the day goes on.
There's still a lot of voting to go. I mean, I'm sure you saw.
There is.
I'm sure you saw that tweet from Kamala Harris, the candidate for vice president, who went so far as to say, "We've got this." Now, you don't get much more confident than that. I mean, can you tell me you're as confident as that? Do you believe you've got this?
We believe we're certainly looking forward to a win here in Florida tonight. And combined with the other states across the country where we're seeing massive turnout, I believe that we're going to be electing a new president of the United States.
Yeah, and today we're still watching those polling queues now. There's an issue of turnout, isn't there, for your party? For your party too. And when it comes to particular demographic sections in Florida, it is known that, well, Cuban Americans are divided, aren't they, in the state of Florida? Those from the Cuban side are more likely, or many of them, more likely to be voting Republicans. Those who are not supporting the Republicans, there's still an issue of getting them to vote out at all. And the same can be said for many African-American voters who may be instinctively easy to persuade round to the Joe Biden side, but can't necessarily be counted on to go to the polling station with quite the enthusiasm with which they might endorse Joe Biden if you stop them in the street.
Well, we're seeing a strong turnout in all our communities. Everybody recognizes the stakes of this election. And as you indicated, where the Cubans may tend to lean toward Donald Trump, the rest of the Hispanic population does not. and particularly our Puerto Rican population across the I-4 corridor and throughout the rest of Florida. It's a very diverse Hispanic population, as you know, and our African American population is African Americans and other minority groups are voting in very, very strong numbers.
Yeah. Okay. Look, you start counting in Florida at 1 a.m. That's UK time.
Yeah.
How soon after that might we hope to see a result?
Well, polls will close at 8 o'clock time, or East Coast time, because the west part of Florida is the Panhandle, and that's on Central time. So, polls will close at 7 for most of Florida. There is another hour of voting for the very western part of Florida. So that's 8 o'clock. Immediately, results will come up for all of our early voting, for vote by mail and early voting, and then the precincts will start reporting. And we believe we'll begin to see the trend early in the evening. We'll get an idea of where we're going. It may take a little longer. We'll wait till we want to make sure that every vote counts and every vote is counted. But we believe we're going to see some results and certainly know the trend going into by mid-evening, I would think.
Okay, well that's going to be important.
Yeah.
And each state, of course, is a state unto itself. No state has an identical population, but you can look for trends. It's said, isn't it, Terry, that the president, it's going to be very, very hard for him to win if he does not win Florida. Whereas Joe Biden, there are other routes. If he doesn't grab it in Florida, there are other routes between where he is and the White House.
And that's exactly right. We call ourselves the one-state showstopper here. If we stop Donald Trump, there's virtually no path for him to win the presidency, and that's why Florida Democrats have gone all out to win this election. Another population that we're seeing response are seniors, in addition to our other normal populations and normal parts of our coalition. We're also seeing responses for seniors who are recognizing the failures of Trump when it comes to the COVID the pandemic. And how seniors have been disproportionately affected by this, as they are in the UK as well. And so we're seeing increasing numbers of seniors who are voting for Joe Biden, regardless of party affiliation.
There's still some hours to go for people to vote. But on the evidence that you've seen so far on the ground in Florida, has it been, or is it so far an orderly election? Because there were worries, not always in Florida, other parts of the country as well, of course, but there could be something like intimidation going on at polling stations, people turning up, trying to influence voters in an improper way. Has there been any evidence of that where you are?
For the most part, it's been orderly, and there have been some incidences of some of particularly the Trump voters, doing caravans that block intersections and tend to block access to the polls. But for the most part, that's not been happening, and we're seeing today, especially, it seems to be fairly orderly across the state.
Okay, Terry, lovely to talk to you. That is Terry Rizzo, who's the chair of the Florida Democratic Party. Such a crucially, vitally important state when it comes to watching how this American election plays out in real time. And where else to do it? I know I would say this, but I mean it. Where else to do that than with Matt Shorty on his Times Radio election special late into the evening. Now, you've been texting in your thoughts about the American election. Rosie from Oxford, she says, after missing out on the Brexit referendum and the last two elections, I won't be making that mistake again. And I baked a chocolate rum cake, so we'll be eating that to either celebrate or make myself feel better. Although, if a certain candidate wins, Trump, I'll probably be resorting to rum to dull the awfulness. Okay, that's a blue Brit there. Let's know how you'll be consuming the election and not the cake. Send us your text, send us your tweets. On mass testing in Liverpool, we've had this from Kate. She says, try an open mind on testing. It's complex and not a forever result. Journalists always adopt a scornful tone instead of linking developments back to the early signalling of its coming. Moonshot, a bit dramatic, but this is the development of that ambition. It's not helpful to always adopt a sceptical approach to government plans. The fact is, no one knows how to handle this virus. That from Kate. Thank you for that, Kate. Taking, well, me and my profession, my trade to task there. It's welcome to hear that. It's welcome to hear anything. I want to know what you're thinking. You know how to do it. Send us a text. Send us a tweet. Now let's go on to this question and look further at the testing in Liverpool. Oliver Wright is, of course, the Times' policy editor. We're talking here about Boris Johnson's so-called moonshot mass testing program, which starts in Liverpool this week. People being offered regular COVID-19 tests. Oliver Wright has been writing about this. Oliver, tell us a little bit more, if you can, about how this is going to work in practice.
Well, Liverpool is They're describing it as a pilot study, if you will, but what they do intend to do is pretty rapidly roll this out across the country. So in Liverpool, the plan is to do up to 100,000 tests a week. And they think that, they'll be in a position to offer everyone in the city a COVID test, frankly, regardless of whether they have symptoms or not. And that's critical because what we do know from surveys like that carried out by the Office of National Statistics is that up to 7 in 10 people who are infectious with COVID don't have any symptoms. So getting in control and getting on top of this virus is almost impossible unless you can actually do that sort of massive community testing that can identify the cases. Then you can ask those people to self-isolate and hopefully get on top of it. Now, in Liverpool, they're going to adopt a number of different methods for this. People will be allowed or offered to go to testing sites and take a test. They'll get the result in 15 minutes or so. They'll also do sort of screening programs in schools, in colleges, and the university. They may also go to specific areas where they notice a spike in cases and do door-to-door tests. I mean, what they want to do is they want to look at different methods and see how effective they are. But it's going to start pretty rapidly by the end of this week. And the idea is that as the country comes out of this month-long lockdown, they will be in a position to really roll it out right across the country.
So look, give me your judgment on this, because you watch these things and follow it very, very closely. A lot about the Liverpool test experiment, if you like, is that it is just that it's experimental, and they're using exceptional techniques for the use of the army in the way the army is going to be used, for example, trialing instant testing systems. Now, they don't automatically translate into a national testing system. So given that these things are concentrated, in the case of the army, concentrated in a way which can't be replicated across the country, and testing instantly, that cannot quickly be replicated across the country. We don't quite know how that's going to play out. How realistic, Oliver, is this ambition in government to see this as a prototype for a national system, and quickly?
The government is being really cautious about this. I mean, they've been burnt before by making pledges on testing, but I think, privately they do think this could be a game changer. Now, the critical thing about this test is it doesn't require a lab to process it, and in fact, it doesn't really require someone with any kind of medical knowledge to administer it. The way in which it was described to me by someone involved in the program is that it's easier than filling up your car with petrol. The first time you do it, you might be a little bit unsure how you should do it, but after that, you can basically do it yourself at home. So that offers the opportunity, for example, of posting out tests to people, and they can just take the test in their own home. They don't even need to go into a centre. There are lots of different ways you can administer this test. I mean, yes, the army are going to be involved in the logistics of the first time round, but you can see a future where actually, you don't need that kind of infrastructure. Interestingly, Slovakia has become the first country in Europe that is really trying to test its entire population. They managed to test 3.6 million people in a weekend, pretty much, 2 days. So it is possible to do it on that scale. It's a huge, huge logistical operation. But I think ministers think that, if there is one thing that is going to get on top of this and allow us effectively to live with the virus until an effective vaccine's found, this is it.
Well, I think we can all cross our fingers and hope that turns out to be the case. Oliver Wright, the Times policy editor, thank you very much indeed. It's 5:24. Some sad news today then. The actor and whose line is it anyway comedian John Sessions has died at the age of 67. His agent confirmed that he passed away at his home in South London after suffering from a heart condition. Here he is impersonating Alan Rickman on QI.
Has some of my favourite dialogue of our great friend Alan Rickman, when he says, after he shot the man, he says, "Mr. Kage, I will count to 3. There will not be a 4. And then he goes downstairs later and he goes, "Mr. Kage won't be joining us for the rest of his life."
He was such an impersonator. Andrew Billen is a feature writer for The Times. He's interviewed John Sessions more than once. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Don.
What are your feelings on us losing John Sessions in this way?
Well, I'm desperately sad to hear it. He's one of these, such a vital person to meet, a man so enamored of his genius, really. To think that he's gone so young, I'm sure you'd agree with that, John, is really very sad. And I think the only thing to do is to put on Stella Street or some of those early spitting images on TV. Once you stop watching or listening to the election, and cheer yourself up by a man who was just probably one of the best impressionists of his age.
He was extraordinary as an impressionist, wasn't he? I mean, I'm just remembering his performance in the Dad's Army movie as Captain Mannering. It was like looking at Arthur Lowe.
It was completely Arthur Lowe, wasn't it? We saw it the other day. Actually, at first I'm not terribly good on faces, and at first I didn't recognise him. He'd put on weight until I last met him. But absolutely, it was just Arthur Lowe there, being difficult and constipated, wasn't it? But I think the thing about him, somebody once said an impressionist is a vengeful wannabe, and I don't think that's true of John Sessions. I think he really admired the people he impersonated. On Stella Street, this amazing conceit where he lines a suburban street in South London with celebrities, so you get the Rolling Stones owning the corner shop. They were all really rather amiable, slightly ridiculous people that he played. You know, Marlon Brando going in to buy his toilet roll from the corner shop, or Roger Moore coming around to give a face flowers to Michael Caine or whoever it was at Christmas. I think he saw them. He was deeply in love with Hollywood and the grand old actors, and to interview him was to get a sort of one-man show out of them.
And those improv skills. I mean, I loved Whose Line Is It Anyway, and marvelled at the ability of the performers on there to do what they seemed to be doing, which was just on the hoof, coming up with funny line after funny line after funny line. I mean, not many comedians can do that.
No, I think he said in the later interview that it had a little bit more rehearsal than we might have thought. He may have been joking. He said if people knew that, they'd expect it to be much funnier than it actually was. But of course, it was extraordinarily funny. I mean, the saddest to me was that the couple of times I met him in the 90s, he didn't seem to be a very happy man. He had told me that he just suffered from terrible self-doubt. I described him as a troubled genius, and he said, well, not genius, but of course he was. He claimed that he tried to commit suicide several times. The last time he was depressed by the Gulf War in 1990. He tried to kill himself. And he seemed to be unhappy, personally couldn't seem to find the right boyfriend that wasn't openly gay, and to his parents, who were quite old-fashioned Scottish people, had died. I'm now really hoping the last 20 years he enjoyed himself, because he gave so much pleasure.
Andrew, thank you. Andrew Billen there, feature writer at the Times, on John Sessions, who will be missed. Now, it's 5:29. Let's just have a brief chat with Hugh Woozencroft from TalkSport about football. We're only 7 games into the Premier League season, but what a season it's been. And if I sound overexcited about that, it's not just that I've felt football starved during the first lockdown and relieved that it's not being stopped now. Look at the table. Leicester is second in the table. Couldn't happen again, could it? Just 1 point behind Liverpool. 4-1 win. 4-1 win away from Leeds. Hello, Hugh.
Hi, good evening, John. Well, listen, if you look at the Premier League table, I think there are at least 4 or 5 clubs who would be looking at it as maybe being their year totally out of the blue, alongside, of course, some of the usual names and faces who were in there. Liverpool, last year's Premier League runaway champions, rather ominously there at the moment as well at the top of the table. But Leicester City, after a fantastic win against Leeds last night, and their manager Brendan Rodgers proving once again what a great manager he is, of course, could be an outside bet too. But just mentioning Liverpool, they're in action tonight in the Champions League. That's the focus for us on TalkSport. Manchester City 2 in action. Both teams are looking to make it 3 wins from 3 in Europe's elite competition. Liverpool travelling to northern Italy, to Bergamo, to face Atalanta. That's a side who was in the quarterfinals of the Champions League last season. Fantastic goal-scoring side. They've scored 23 goals in 8 games already, almost 3 average per game. It'll be pretty much a straight shootout tonight, because both sides have had leaky defensives as well. We'll see if they can sort their defensive issues. When it comes to Liverpool, Joel Matip could return for them from injury, and that could be massive. Manchester City host Olympiacos. We'll be keeping you right up to date with that on TalkSport this evening as well. They could have their Brazilian forward Gabriel Jesus back for what should be a pretty light evening of work against the Greek side. But both sides, Manchester City and Liverpool, going head-to-head this weekend in the Premier League, so maybe they'll be looking forward to that in terms of their team selections. Of course, they've shared the last 3 Premier League titles, so these matches will be looked to very, very keenly. I'm not sure, though, whether it will be a decider this weekend between Manchester City and Liverpool. We'll have to wait and see on that one, John.
Okay, Hugh, thanks very much indeed. Hugh Wozencroft from TalkSport. Now, coming up in the next half hour of the programme, I'm going to be talking to Britain's youngest published author, who is only, wait for it, 6 years old. And of course, later on, Carol Walker, she'll be with us from 10, building up to our nice live coverage of the US presidential election results. We're expecting that crucial Florida result we were talking about just a moment ago could be maybe sometime around midnight. And then Matt Shawley, Tom Newton-Dunn will be taking us through the night before Gloria and Stig are there when you wake up with Times Radio breakfast, assuming you've had any sleep at all. So stay tuned, stay alert, stay with it. It's 5:31. Here's the latest news.
The 2020 US presidential election on Times Radio. Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thanks, John. Good evening. The UK's terror threat level is being raised from substantial to severe. It means an attack is highly likely. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says the escalation isn't based on any specific threats.
The British public should be alert but not alarmed. This is a precautionary measure following the terrible incidences that we've seen in France last week and the events that we saw in Austria last night.
Well, England's preparing for a month-long nationwide shutdown from Thursday. The escalation comes the day after the Austrian terror attacks, where 4 people were killed and 22 injured. The attacker shot dead by police in Vienna was an Islamic State sympathiser who'd spent time in jail. The government's chief scientific advisor has denied frightening people with modelling scenarios. Sir Patrick Vallance has told MPs figures of up to 4,000 coronavirus-related deaths a day were based on assumptions and a reasonable worst-case scenario. 2 people have died after being swept into the sea from a harbour wall. The man and woman were found in rough waters near Helston in Cornwall last night. Looking ahead to tomorrow, most parts dry with sunny spells, still rather cold but with lighter winds, turning wet and windy across northern Scotland. Toby Gillis has all the sports news.
Manager Ryan Giggs will not be part of the Wales set-up for the upcoming friendly with USA and Nations League games with Republic of Ireland and Finland. The manager has been pulled from being involved after his arrest on suspicion of assaulting his girlfriend, which he denies. Police bailed Giggs pending further inquiries. Coach Robert Page will take his place during the international break. The FA of Wales says the decision was come to by both parties. AFC Wimbledon play in their traditional SW19 postcode for the first time tonight, almost 30 years after the club they rose from, Wimbledon, last did. It's their first game at the new Plough Lane, Doncaster, the visitors in League One. Legendary Dons manager Dave Bassett told Times Radio it's a huge moment.
To fans, obviously their ground means a lot to them. It's their community, it's their church, it's their home, and every club loves to be involved. And a lot of the fans who supported Wimbledon supported AFC and helped them do the tremendous achievement of getting into the Football League and getting promoted, and now also going back to Plough Lane in a brand new stadium, which is a fantastic achievement.
Rugby League's Super League clubs have agreed to end the season early and bring forward an expanded playoff system to determine the champions. That after coronavirus ended the season of Hull KR and drastically affected Catalan Dragons. Times Radio's Charlotte Fisher reports.
Hull KR announced earlier that they couldn't fulfil their remaining fixtures because of a COVID-19 outbreak. That, plus a similar issue at Catalan Dragons over the last few weeks, pushed the clubs to act. The final matches of the regular season on Friday will include Wigan against Huddersfield, with Warriors knowing a win will secure them the league leaders' shield. After that, the top 2 will have a week off, while the teams finishing 3rd to 6th will play off for a right to join them in the semi-finals. The grand final is due to be played on Friday the 27th of November at the KCOM Stadium in Hull.
And all-rounder Ben Stokes' return to the England cricket squad has been confirmed. He was given leave to be with his family in August and hasn't played for his country since. Stokes is in the squad for the 2020s in South Africa later this month, but along with bowler Jofra Archer and fellow all-rounder Sam Curran will be rested for the one-day internationals. National selector Ed Smith hinted wicket-keeper Jos Buttler will get the same treatment at some point moving forward.
There are several players who play every format for England. Obviously, Jos Buttler is also in every format for England, and Sam Curran is in every squad. Ben and Jofra pretty much start every game that they're available for. So we're just very mindful of the amount of cricket we've got coming up.
Remember, you can hear Atalanta against Liverpool from the Champions League live tonight on TalkSport.
John Pienaar, A Drive on Times Radio with Land Rover, celebrating 50 years of Range Rover.
Now, in the next hour of the programme, we're going to be talking US elections. What else? And here's the good news. We can catch up with our man across the Atlantic on the ground, Tom Newton-Dunn, our globe-trotting chief political commentator. If anyone can guide us through the fog of the election, it is Tom. Always worth listening to. So let's keep in touch and keep up with Tom when we hear from him just after 6 o'clock. And I was asking earlier on how you're going to be spending this election night, US election night. What supplies are you getting in? Hot dogs, beers, cream soda? You tell me. And how are you feeling about all of that? We've got this in. She says, hello, I'm Misha, a sixth form student from Devon. Planning definitely on getting up to watch the US election tonight. I'm getting up at midnight, says Misha, and I've taken on the role of alarm for over 10 others in my year group and will be giving them a phone call when the Florida results start coming through. Well, look, enjoy it, Misha. These moments do not come along very often in anyone's life, and who knows how this is going to go this evening, what sort of morning it's going to be after this, who knows how long it may go on for. But however it goes tonight, I think I can pretty much guarantee you that if you are interested and engaged and excited at this stage, you will not forget the way this plays out tonight. So look, tell us what you're doing, tell us how you're planning to get through the evening, and what are you feeling in your gut as you wait for this American result? Are you as keyed up and anticipating such a huge event in anything like the way that I am? I think many of you will be. Send us a text to 7222. Start your message with the word Times, or a tweet to @TimesRadio. That's 5:38. Every week at about this time on Drive, I host Leading by Example, when I speak to pioneers and innovators and creators to understand what motivates them and what mark they hope to leave in society.
Leaders with John Pienaar on Times Radio with Land Rover, celebrating 50 years of Range Rover.
Well, this evening I'm joined by Britain's youngest published author, who is Heath Grace and who is 6 years old, and joins us along with his mum, Jo, live from Cornwall. Heath has just published My Mummy is Autistic. Hello, Heath. Hello, Jo.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. Can I just ask you first, Heath? Goodness, you have written a book. You drew the pictures in the book. Everyone's talking about you, Heath. How do you feel right now? You must be happy.
Yes, I am happy.
I can hear it. Do you remember, Heath, when you got hold of your book, the published book, and held it in your hand? Tell me how that made you feel.
Was it quite exciting?
Yes, it was very exciting.
Yeah, well, I can think of a lot of people who would love to have the same experience and may just never get round to it, Heath. So look, well done. And your mum is there with you. Hello, Jo.
Hi.
Hi. Tell me how you're feeling, because I think I can guess that you're proud, but you tell me.
Oh, yes. Obnoxiously so. Obviously, I think everything that he's done is wonderful, but this is really something extraordinary, and I don't think he realises quite how exceptional it is. He's been very excited because the book had a birthday cake, but that's about the level we're at here.
Yeah. Look, tell us about the two of you, and thanks again, Jo, and to Heath for coming along and chatting to us this evening. It's so nice to talk to you in this way. A bit about the background, Jo, if I could, because you realised that your autism was a particular issue really only, it's true, isn't it, when you were having your second child after returning from Germany back among fellow English speakers, and you found that it wasn't easy to understand midwives when they were talking to you at consultations. That's right, is it?
That's an interesting one. I think, yeah, I've known I was autistic for a long time, but I was only diagnosed in adulthood. I'm part of a generation of women who I think are all being diagnosed about now. We're referred to as the lost generation because the diagnostic criteria for autism was written around what it looks like in men, and so naturally it finds boys, and we're being found slightly further down the line.
Yeah.
And it's a strange experience when it's your perception of the world, because, like you say, I had Heath in Germany, and there was never any expectation that I would understand the meetings that I had with my midwives there, and so I didn't really notice in the same way. I've just had my second child, and this time around, issues to do with that my brain processes language slightly slower than a typical brain were really apparent, especially in a lockdown world where I had to attend the appointments on my own, and then I would come home and my husband would say, so what did they say? And you think, I don't really know. I'd be really pleased with myself for having done the appointment well.
Yeah.
I would have smiled in all the right places and made all the right small talk, but I wouldn't have taken in any of the information, and that was very humbling.
Yes.
I found it humiliating, actually, and I shouldn't, but it's been noticeable this time around.
Well, look, I mean, you don't need me to tell you that you shouldn't, but it's fascinating to get your view on this. A lot of people will relate to this, Joe, the way your husband joined you in your consultations during that pregnancy on Zoom to talk to midwives and other professionals.
Yes, well, once I'd acknowledged that I was having difficulties, then the midwife team that supported me were really super, and they allowed him to attend. I used to bring him with me on my phone so he could listen in and ask the questions.
And then, Joe, tell us how you came to see it as an issue in the way that you related to Heath sitting next to you, because it was the way that he spoke to you quickly, the way young kids do, and you couldn't catch what he was saying.
It's interesting. I think there's a slight bias there in saying that it's an issue, because it definitely, the situation that triggered the book definitely was him experiencing my autism in the negative, but he also experiences it in the positive.
Yes.
And I imagine that's the same for neurotypical parents. There'd be aspects where the skills that you have would benefit your child, and aspects where the needs that you have would detract. But the book came about because I ran over his foot in a supermarket. We were shopping, and he was riding on the front of the trolley and telling me this big long story, and somewhere in the middle of it he told me to stop the trolley, but I was still a couple of sentences back, and I didn't catch up to where he was before he jumped off the trolley, and I'd run his foot over.
Yeah.
And he wasn't particularly hurt, and I said sorry, but as we were walking around the supermarket, I was thinking, I can't promise him that I won't do that again. And so I tried to explain to him how my brain works, and that's what he's written about in his book, is how Mummy's brain processes language.
So that gets us to the way the book happened, which is such a positive story in so many ways, isn't it? It had a lot to do, you tell me, with the way that you encouraged Heath. I want to go back and talk to Heath again in a moment if I can, but you encouraged him to draw, and you kept him at it until this thing was created.
Well, I mean, he suffers from having a primary school teacher as a mother more than he suffers from having an autistic mother. And it was the start of the summer holidays, and I was looking for, I always look for reasons to make writing purposeful, because children don't see any point in writing if you just tell them to do it because.
Yeah.
And the morning after I'd run over his foot in the supermarket, I asked him if he remembered what happened the day before. And he was wonderfully quick. He said, yes, you ran over my foot. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then I said, do you remember why? And he was explaining it to me a bit, and I kept pushing him. And eventually he sort of got fed up with me, and he went and got a piece of paper and drew me a picture to prove that he understood.
Yeah.
And the picture that he drew was of all the words kind of squashing on the outside of my head, waiting to get in. And it was a really lovely moment for me, because I could see that he did understand, and I felt seen as myself. And I thought that that's a really good picture. You could write a sentence underneath it. Won't that be fun? To explain it to other people. And then we did a few of them, and after sort of 3 or 4 days, he said, I'm bored of this. Let's stop. And so we stopped for a bit. But I'm a published author myself, and we were out on a walk, and I was talking to him about the experience of writing my books, and I said, quite often it's quite difficult to write the book, but it's really good fun to have written the book.
Yeah.
And the next morning I said, would you like to do a page? And at that time, we were just thinking we would sort of stick it together ourselves at home, like keep it in a ring binder. We weren't, we did not in any way imagine how this has ended up. It's like published by Routledge and with a foreword by Chris Packham, who was so kind to do that for us.
That's
then
wonderful.
he did the rest of it.
And there he is, Joe, the youngest published author in this country, and just by a few months, missing being the youngest published author in the world. I mean, how wonderful, Joe, is that?
We didn't know that until that came out in the newspapers when the book was published. You think, if I'd known, I would have, given Routledge a little nudge and we could have published a couple of months earlier, and then you'd be the youngest in the world. It'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
I think it's probably a decent achievement, just as it is. Heath, can I just ask you again? Are you going to write another book?
No.
Really? You've done one. They say the first one is the hardest. Why not give us another one?
What do you think? Would you like to write another one?
I wouldn't like to, but because it wasn't very fun writing a book.
It was more fun drawing the pictures.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I don't want to put more pressure on you, Heath, than you need to. I mean, that's quite an achievement as it is. And Joe, for you, it's obviously a wonderful thing to happen in your family, with your child, but it's also to you something which can help other parents with autism and their children.
Yeah, I think there's a real challenge inherent in Heath's book, because he was 5 when he wrote it, and although obviously the explanation in it is the one that I gave him when I ran over his foot, the understanding of that explanation and the acceptance of my difference, and just you're on the radio so people can't see, but the joy in his pictures, they're just so bright and happy. If a 5-year-old can understand difference and be so accepting of it in that way, that really throws a challenge out to the adult world, who might not be so good at it.
Well, that is a message worth spreading, and we're talking there about this book, this remarkable book by a remarkable 6-year-old young author. My Mummy is Autistic. It was lovely of you to take the time to talk to me this evening, Joe. That was 6-year-old Heath Grace and his mum Joe, with me, John Pienaar, on Leading by Example.
Leaders with John Pienaar on Times Radio with Land Rover, celebrating 50 years of Range Rover.
Early breakfast on Times Radio with Dell Technologies. Tomorrow morning from 5, join Callum MacDonald for a first look at the stories making the morning headlines.
I'll be reviewing the front pages you're waking up to, exploring the key developments shaping the day's news agenda, and making sure you start the day well informed.
Plus, get ahead of the markets with updates, analysis and insights from the dedicated Daily Business Bulletin. Early breakfast on Times Radio with Dell. If you're a small business, we want to help. Call one of our tech advisors now.
John Pienaar, A Drive, on Times Radio with Land Rover, celebrating 50 years of Range Rover.
And that was such a lovely conversation with Joe and Heath, the 6-year-old author, youngest published author of his book, My Mummy is Autistic. I mean, go out and get it. I'm going to go and find it right now and put it right on the shelf. I've been asking how you're going to be spending tonight and the early hours as the election results unroll in the United States. I'm picking up that not every last one of you might be quite as happy or enthusiastic about spending the night in that way. Stephen Tettenhall, Wolverhampton, has texted in. Thank you for this, Steve. He says, looking forward to tonight? You must be joking. Why this obsession with US politics? So glad it's almost over at last. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective. It always adds texture to the way that you are thinking out there as you listen to what's going on. I mean, tell us what you think. Look, I've got to say, Steve, I don't agree with you for 1 nanosecond, but it's going to be to tell us what you're thinking and share your own thoughts. Text 7222, start with the word Times, or a tweet to @Times Radio. Now, it is 5:50. We've been also talking about the terror attack in Austria, and the city of Vienna overnight. Austria is in mourning following that terrorist shooting in Vienna, in which at least 4 people were killed. The gunman was shot dead by police. Questions are being raised about security in the country. The attacker was released from jail last December. Andreas Schieder is Cyprian member of the European Parliament who serves on the Committee on Foreign Affairs and joins us now. Andreas, hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon to you. So the attacker has been identified as an Islamist terrorist, released from jail just last December, which I guess raises a number of questions. What are the questions that are prominent in your mind, Andreas?
For me, the question is, of course, is he part of a real network, or was he just some kind of admirer of Islamic State and therefore doing this attack? At the end, it doesn't make any difference, but for the future consequences, it is quite important.
And what lessons do you expect will be or should be learned by the authorities in Austria after this, assuming they need to be learned?
I have to say, Austria, and especially Vienna, never was used to have any terrorist attack or any public tension. So therefore, we enjoyed a lot of liberty, freedom, and maybe also sleepiness in the city. So for the security people, the policemen and others, I think it was the first experience to have a real terrorist attack. They made it quite well, but for the future, of course, it will change our society because security issues might be also in the everyday life. We are not used to see policemen with helmets on every corner, and since yesterday we see this. But I hope that we will not change, let's say, our living mood completely, because this is what terrorists want. They want to impose on society fear, anxiousness, and all these kind of things. And what we need to send them is that our democracy is quite strong, and we will not change the life mood at all.
Okay, look, you sit, Andreas, in the European Parliament, and your point there is it would be wrong to overreact because that is, among other things, what terrorists want to happen. But should there be a reaction to what has happened in Vienna, especially after what has happened in France, in Nice, for example, and we've seen President Macron of France reacting, raising his voice as something of a leading exponent of a reaction, a clear, firm position when it comes to Islamist terrorism. What is your take on a reaction across Europe, involving Europe as a whole, to incidents like the one we saw in Vienna and have seen in France recently, but of course before that?
I think we have to find out if there is a linkage between the attacks in France and those in Vienna, or if it's just that people are copying these bad ideas from one to each other. And of course, we have to work more clearly also on the question how we can have let's say the question is what went wrong with the biography of this guy. He grew up in Austria. He had a double citizenship, but let's say he was a classical Austrian. He didn't grow up in a, let's say, negative neighborhood. He even grew up in one of the suburbs, which were quite fancy and nice. And then finally he decided to become a terrorist. So I think we have to work out what went wrong that we did not see. There are some questions. So he was seen by the secret police. He was observed. He was seen as an IS sympathy taker. So what happened that he was released from prison so early? Why the state police, which is the secret service, were not controlling him so much? So these are questions. And how could a guy like him get all these weapons, which are not easy to get here in Austria?
Is there a lot to be done, maybe more to be done, when it comes to sharing the lessons of an awful incident like this? There is already a good deal of coordination when it comes to sharing intelligence and sharing experience across Europe, and that obviously includes Britain. The UK has left, is leaving the European Union, but is still quite a significant player in all of this. Is there a case for more coordination, more effective coordination, closer coordination?
I think the police forces, of course, they need stronger cooperation in exchanging not only names and of people, but also of methods, like how they do the profiling, how they treat people, how they work behind all this, and probably also I think it's important that all the politicians from the left, is also from the right and the government, they said it was one negative guy, it was one terrorist. It is not that all people who believe in Islam are guilty. So to make this divide clearly between Islamistic terror and religious belief, which has nothing in common. But maybe we have to start a stronger dialogue also with the religious club, so that they also get some tools how they can early warning when they see a guy is, let's say, moving up into terrorist circumstances, so that there is some early warning. We thought we had a good system, but probably we didn't.
Well, I mean, you say that, of course, Andreas, and you make a fair and a strong point. There is always a case for more vigilance, more alertness to evidence or clues of what might be about to take place. But there's no such thing, is there, as 100% security. Certainly, this individual was armed with a weapon and opened fire on the streets of Vienna. But other terrorist attacks can and have and will no doubt take place, and it's not possible to guarantee that that will not happen.
This is true, and I've made this the lessons which makes us all in Vienna so sad, because we were not used to this. Our inner belief was there is no threat in our everyday life, neither in the underground nor on public spaces. And especially yesterday, where a lot of people went out because it was the evening before lockdown, so everybody used the chance to get his final beer somewhere in a garden, and we had 20 degrees, which is extremely hot for November. So people were out in the streets, and this probably was also what the terrorist was using. And for sure, people will now look differently when they go out.
Okay, and Andreas, let us hope that people share, and I'm sure many people will share that sense of perspective about even such an awful incident as this. Andreas Scheider from the European Parliament there talking to us. And we've just got time before the top of the hour. Danny Finkelstein's joining us to talk about his piece, his column in the comment pages of the Times. Hi, Danny.
Hi, John. I'll rattle through it because I know we're close up to the news.
Forgive me, time squeeze, but do tell us.
I've written a column tomorrow on Tory rebellions against Boris.
Danny Finkelstein. I don't know if we've lost that line. Danny Finkelstein, are you with us? No, I think for the moment we may have lost Danny Finkelstein. Okay, that was not a triumph. We squeezed Danny all too much, the way sometimes we do, and apologise to Danny and apologise to you for that. And then we lose him in the middle of the conversation because the line goes down. We're talking there, or we were talking just for a brief but precious moment, to Danny Finkelstein about his column in the Times section of the comments section of the Times tomorrow. He is talking, I know, in that piece about loyalty or the lack of support for the Prime Minister as things stand among Conservative MPs, among his MPs in the House of Commons, and how realistic and well thought through is that? Is this something which can be easily explained? Is it something which could be avoided? Danny sets all of that out in his piece. Now, he hasn't been able, I wish he had been able, but he hasn't been able to tell us about that piece himself, but it's going to be there in the comment section of the Times, and you can read that in the paper tomorrow. Or there's a quicker way. If you are a digital subscriber to the paper, you can get it now. It's just been published as part of the Times 5 p.m. online edition. So go online, have a read, subscribe on the way, and the way to do that, well, I think you know how that's done. You go to times.radio/subscribe.